He buried her, then stood at her graveside and preached the most powerful sermon anyone in that community had ever heard. And nobody, not one single person, knew that the man holding the Bible over his wife's coffin was the reason she was in it. I sat in that church for 11 years. I fasted for that man. I prayed for that man. I cleaned his room and office with my own hands every Saturday morning. And when he finally called me to his house on the last night of his life, he told me that every fast I ever did in that building was never going to God. Not one of them. Real quick, I have 13,000 subscribers on this channel, and when I posted this video, less than 1,000 knew it existed. If you are here, you are one of the lucky ones. Hit the notification bell so you will be notified anytime a new video comes up, because what I share on this channel are not just stories, they are warnings, and warnings are only useful if they arrive in time. Now, let me tell you about a pastor and a wife he put in the ground. Pastor had been leading that church for 11 years when I joined. By the time I became close to him, he had been there for over 2 decades. He was not a flashy man, no private jet, no designer suits, no screaming from the pulpit demanding seed offerings. He was quiet, measured, the kind of pastor who remembered your name, your mother's name, your children's name. People drove from 3 states away to sit under his ministry. And the miracles were real. I want to be very careful when I say that, because what I'm about to tell you is not a story about a man who faked miracles. The miracles were real. That is what made everything else so much harder to understand. But there was one thing about Pastor that nobody ever discussed openly: his wife, or rather, the absence of her. Now let's go back to 20 years ago when I joined that church. Fresh from university, far from home, I knew nobody in that city. The first Sunday I walked in, Pastor was preaching about loneliness, about being in a strange place and feeling invincible. I sat in the back, and after the service, he walked past me. This man with 100 people trying to reach him, and he stopped. He looked at me and said, "You are not invincible. This is your home now." I never left. Over the years, I became one of his closest workers. I handled the offering counting every Sunday. I cleaned his office and the house, and also helped clean the church on Saturdays. I ran personal errands for him. I knew his schedule, his preferences, his moods. I was trusted completely. And I trusted him completely. Like I said, there was one thing about Pastor that nobody ever discussed openly: the absence of his wife. Her name was Miriam. She had died 9 years before I joined the church, which means by the time I arrived, she had already been gone for years. But her presence was everywhere in that building. Her photograph hung in the foyer. A large portrait. She was beautiful. Soft eyes, gentle smile, the kind of face that made you feel immediately safe. Pastor kept a small version of that photograph on his desk, always facing him. Always. He never remarried in 20 years. Not once. People respected that. They said it was loyalty. They said it was love. They said that man loved his wife so much that no other woman could fill that place. And Pastor never corrected them. He let them believe it was devotion. The truth was something else entirely. I learned about Miriam slowly, in pieces, over years. The older members, the ones who had been there from the very beginning, would sometimes mention her quietly, always with a sadness that went beyond normal grief. One woman, Mama Chioma, who had known Pastor since before the church existed, once said something to me that I filed away without fully understanding. She said, "That man has never forgiven himself, and he never will." I asked her what she meant. She looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Some things are not mine to say, but if Pastor ever trusts you enough to tell you himself, listen carefully, because he has been carrying it alone for a very long time." I did not understand what she meant. Not then. What I knew about Miriam from the official story was this: she had died young, 31 years old. A sudden illness, aggressive, fast-moving, medically unexplained. She was healthy 1 month, gone the next. The doctors had no satisfying answer. It happened too fast for any treatment to work. Pastor had been devastated. The church said he did not preach for 3 months after her death. He sat in the front row every Sunday while other ministers led the service. Just sat there, silent. When he finally returned to the pulpit, people said something in him had changed. He was still anointed, still powerful. The miracles continued, actually increased after her death. But something behind his eyes was different. Something that looked, to those who knew him well, less grief and more guilt. I served faithfully for 11 years without knowing any of this beneath the surface. My life in that church was simple and full. I had community. I had purpose. I had a spiritual father who I believed was one of the most genuinely good men I had ever encountered. But looking back now, there were signs I missed. Signs I dismissed because I loved him too much to question them. The first sign was the fasting. Pastor called for corporate fast regularly, 3 days, 7 days, sometimes 21 days. And he was always very specific about who he wanted fasting. Not the whole church, specific people. He would call names. My name was always on the list. Always. I was proud of that. I thought it meant that he trusted my spiritual capacity. I thought it meant my prayers carried weight. I had no idea what those fasts were actually being used for. The second sign was the prayer sections. Sometimes after regular church activities, when everyone else had gone home, Pastor would ask a small group of us to stay behind for what he called deep intercession. We would pray for hours, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning. During those sessions, Pastor would pray in a way that was different from his pulpit prayers, deeper, more intense, sometimes in languages none of us recognized. We assumed it was the Spirit. We assumed everything was the Spirit. The third sign, and this is the one that should have told me everything, was what happened every year on the anniversary of Miriam's death. Every year on that date, Pastor cancelled all church activities. He went into his house and he did not come out for 3 days. He called it a personal time of mourning and prayer. Nobody questioned it. We left him alone every year for 20 years. What was he doing in that house for 3 days every year? I know now, and I wish I did not. 3 weeks before Pastor called me to his house, he fell ill. Not seriously at first. A fatigue that would not lift. A heaviness that the doctors could not diagnose. He was 56 years old. People assumed it was age, but those of us close to him knew it was something else, because his eyes had changed. The guilt that had always lived quietly behind them had moved to the surface. He looked like a man who had finally run out of time. It was during this illness that Mama Chioma came to see him. I was there when she arrived. I let her in and then stepped away to give them privacy. And what I heard, I was not meant to hear. Mama Chioma's voice was low but urgent. She said, "The time has come. You know it has come. You cannot keep paying what you have been paying. It is time to end it. Pastor said something I could not fully make out. Then Mama Chioma said, Miriam would not want this to continue. She did not choose this. You chose it, and you have been punishing yourself and others ever since. Confess it, release it, or it will take more people before it takes you. I heard Pastor begin to weep. I had never heard that man cry in 11 years. I walked away from that wall, but the words stayed with me. It will take more people before it takes you. More people. What did that mean? I learned the answer 3 weeks later, the night he called me to his house. It was a Wednesday, late, almost 10 o'clock. My phone rang. It was Pastor's personal line. The number only his innermost workers had. He said, I need you to come tonight. Now, come alone and tell nobody. His voice was different, stripped of everything that usually made it warm and authoritative. He sounded afraid. I almost did not go. Something in my body, something I now believe was trying to protect me, said, stay home. But 11 years of trust overruled it. I went. When I arrived, the house was dark except for one light in the sitting room. He opened the door before I could knock. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, like something had been draining him from the inside for a very long time, and tonight there was almost nothing left. He said, sit down. I have been trying to find the courage to say this for years. Tonight, I do not have the luxury of more time. I sat, and he began. He told me that before there was a church, before there were miracles, before there were thousands of members, there was a young man who wanted desperately to be used by God. He had prayed for years, fasted for years, believed for years, and nothing came. He said, I was 34 years old. I had given everything to God and received nothing back. No platform, no anointing, no open doors. I was invisible and I was angry. Then someone found him in that anger. He did not tell me exactly who or what, only that a man came to him, a man who seemed to know things, specific things about his prayers, his frustrations, his deepest desires. This man told him there was another way to receive what he wanted, a faster way, a guaranteed way. He said the agreement was presented to him as something spiritual, something ancient. He told himself it was still God, just a different path to the same destination. He was 34 years old and he said yes. This agreement gave him everything he asked for. Within 1 year of signing it, the church had started. Within 3 years, hundreds to thousands were attending. The miracles began. The healings were real. The prophecies were accurate. He said, I told myself the fruit proved the source was good, because how could a dark thing produce genuine healings? How could it restore marriages and deliver people from addiction? He paused when he said that. Then he said quietly, I understand now that darkness is not stupid. It gives you enough real fruit to keep you convinced, to keep you inside the agreement, to keep you producing more of what it actually wants. I asked him, what did it actually want? He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, souls, not dramatically, not obviously, just access, a slow, quiet access to every person who came through those doors genuinely seeking God, every person who fasted, every person who prayed deeply, their spiritual energy redirected quietly without their knowledge. I felt cold. I thought about every fast I had ever done for that church, every 3-day fast, every 7-day fast, every 21-day fast, every night I had stayed behind for deep intercession. I thought about my name, always on the list, always. I asked him about Miriam. He closed his eyes, and for a long time, he did not speak. He said Miriam had found out, 2 years into the church, when everything was growing and the miracles were flowing, she had found something in his private study. Documents, materials, things she was never supposed to see. She confronted him. He said she was not angry. That was the thing that broke me. She was not angry at all. She was just heartbroken. She looked at me and said, I married a man who wanted God. What happened to that man? He told her everything, and Miriam, being Miriam, said she would stay with him, that they would find a way to break the agreement together, that God's mercy was bigger than any covenant made in darkness. She began to pray specifically and aggressively, targeting the agreement, fasting against it, speaking against it openly in her private prayers. She was dead within 4 months. Pastor said, I knew immediately what had happened. There was no medical explanation because the explanation was not medical. She had become a threat to the agreement, and the agreement protected itself. He said, she died because of what I signed. She died because she loved me enough to fight something she did not create. She paid for my decision with her life. He said that was why he never remarried, not out of devotion, but out of refusal. He said, I will not bring another woman into the reach of what I had made. I will not risk another Miriam. That was the one boundary I kept, the one thing I could still control. He had lived with that for 20 years, alone, paying a price every single year on the anniversary of her death. Going into that house for 3 days, not mourning, renewing. Every year for 20 years, he had been renewing the agreement because he did not know how to stop. Because every time he tried, something happened. Someone got sick. Something collapsed. The agreement reminded him who was in control. Until now. Until tonight. I asked him, why are you telling me this? Why me? Why tonight? He said, because Mama Chioma was right. It is taking more people. The price has been escalating for years, and recently I was shown who is next on the list. He looked directly at me, and I understood. He said, you have been my most faithful member, the one who loves me unconditionally, the one who will do anything to make me happy, the one whose spiritual energy has been the most useful to what I signed. And now it wants more than your devotion and fasting. It wants a full surrender, and I will not allow that. I called you here tonight because you deserve to know, and because knowing is the only thing that can protect you now. I could not speak. 11 years. I had spent 11 years fasting, praying, serving, and every single act of devotion had been quietly redirected. I had been feeding something without ever knowing it. I had been on a list, just like the woman before me, just like Miriam. He told me what I needed to do to break what had attached itself to me through years of unknowing participation. He told me to leave the church immediately, not gradually, that night. He told me to find a specific kind of spiritual covering and stay under it without wavering. And he told me to pray specifically, not generally, against every fast I had ever done in that building, to reclaim every act of devotion that had been redirected. Then he said, I am going to do what I should have done 20 years ago, what Miriam died trying to do. I am going to break this agreement completely. It will cost me. I know what it will cost me, but I am tired of what it costs everyone else. I asked him, what will it cost you? He said, everything Miriam paid, and I am ready. I left that house at 1:30 in the morning. I did not go back to that church, not once. Pastor died 11 days later. The official cause was organ failure, sudden and medically unexplained. He was 56 years old, and had shown no signs of serious illness beyond the fatigue of recent weeks. The doctor said it was simply his time. I knew it was not simply anything. The church continued after his death. His senior pastors took over. The members continued. Most of them never got to know what had held that ministry together from the very beginning, or what it had cost. Miriam, and finally, him. I think about him often, not with anger. I tried anger, it did not last, because I watched a man spend 20 years trying to contain something he was too afraid and too ashamed to fully confront. And in the end, when he was 56 years old and running out of time, he found the courage. It cost him his life, but he found it. I think about Miriam more, a woman who found out the truth about the man she loved, and instead of leaving, decided to fight for him. She did not create the problem. She did not sign the agreement. She was completely innocent, and she paid the highest price. That is the part I cannot make peace with. That is the part I do not think I ever will. I want to say something to everyone watching this. But before then, subscribe. Hit on the notification bell. That is very important, because the next confession is already waiting and you don't want to miss it. And if this story moved you, share it. Someone in your circle needs to hear it. Please, those of you who are deeply committed to a church, who fast when your pastor calls for fasting, who stays behind for the late night prayer sessions, who serve faithfully without question, your devotion is not the problem. Your faith is not the problem, but devotion without discernment is a door. And not every spiritual house is built on what it claims to be built on. I am not telling you to distrust God. I am telling you to ask God regularly, specifically, and directly to show you the true foundation of every spiritual covering you sit under, because some foundations are built on prayer, but some are built on what looks like prayer, but are not. Miriam saw the difference, and it cost her everything. Make sure you see it too before it costs you. I will see you again in the next one.